Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Next in Time podcast. I'm your host, ST, and today our guest is Ski Kinsey. And if you want to know more about Ski, he is the founder and CEO of FastCharge Energy, who's looking to build charging stations for EVs, including Teslas. And he's had a very fascinating career in being a consultant, building and operating businesses, and he's looking to utilize those experiences into what he's building currently. And so, Ski, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, ST.
I'm glad you're able to join us, and I'm glad you're able to, delve into your overall life in terms of how you became. It's like, I looked at your LinkedIn and your your experience so far. It's like you had so many of very fascinating life experiences, all the way to like building a business, consulting, like being your own person, and then all the way now to working your way into it, into what you're building right now. So what's that like?
Yeah, well, that's the advantage of being older. I remember when I got out of college, you have mock interviews, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps right out of high school. I was 17 years old, and long story short, have some career choices, and then with the GI Bill, I get to go back to college, and I was a non-traditional student. And at the mock interview, the guy says, "Wow, you built this amazing career, these stepping stones." He says, how as a generalist, do you expect to make any money? Well, at that time I didn't have an answer, but I
This
knew I was
was
willing.
What
I was
year was
willing to
this?
outwork anybody in the room.
I was just gonna say, what year was this?
I graduated in 1981, May of 81, from Kent State University here in Ohio.
And then now it's like, and they were telling you back then how are you gonna be amount to something great if you're because everyone says you got to be specializing in something, and you were able to take the opposite path and becoming a generalist, and just
Yes.
trying your luck in many different fields, and then just figure out your overall passion.
Well, my dad asked me one time. He goes, how are you going to figure this out? And I said, what's that? And he goes, well, he says, you're a natural born educator, but there's no money in it. And he knew one of my passions was at the time to make money. And I
Yeah.
said, consulting.
Consulting. Hey, all you got to do is sit down, speak with people, and then like give them their advice, and then they'll pay you money, and then continue on that relationship. That's kind of how the world
Yeah.
works in a way.
Yeah. And my dad had a business, a friend that owned some businesses, and he needed some help with computers. Again, back in 81, the PC was the thing. And he reached out and he says, hey, can I buy you lunch? And that was in November of 1981.
Right.
And I realized a lot of people had a lot of questions. So I spent over 20 years in IT, information technology,
Yeah.
full life cycle software development. And another long story short, we ended up over in Sydney, Ohio, near Dayton, Ohio, where LexisNexis is located. And if you don't
Yeah.
know, that's where all the case law in America is stored in a big mainframe over there. So I got a chance to go work there and consult. And amazing. The only place I ever worked, their library was bigger than mine. So
Yeah, speaking of mainframes, is like
yeah,
I mean, outside of working with this podcast, I do help out with a company that basically runs their insurance systems on the mainframe. So that's it's a glimpse as to how the world looked like before how the world of computer science looked like in let's say the 70s or 80s, even before that. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's like a unique experience for me because I get to learn something from way back when to now. Like, okay, now it all makes sense to why it's all built this way. Because
yeah,
really hard to gauge a lot of things going on with the modern day applications. There's just so many moving parts to it. But then when you go back and work on a mainframe system, it's like, okay, it's just everything's all in one place and it's all so straightforward. Now you make that all makes sense as to why the modern day applications are what they are today.
yeah. Yeah, that's like recently I got excited about containers. And I'm not into active development today, but I'm always working on projects for myself. And it's like, why couldn't I have invented that? I mean, this is the most amazing opportunity, I think. And then, as you probably know, one of the big topics today is this chat GPT
So the chat bot
from
that
OpenAI, one of Elon Musk companies. And this thing is phenomenal. But the cool thing is there's actually containers out there. And if you know anything about containers, you can pull them down, so to speak, and spin up chat GPT like in seconds. I mean, it doesn't even take a minute to launch a new container with all that functionality. And there was a post on LinkedIn earlier this morning. Somebody actually spun one up and built a Linux kernel inside the container running the chat bot. And you just type in commands and it does it. So
yes, it's fair. Just say, hey, please, or like, well, give me an example of a command. Let's say,
well, like you want in the Linux world, you want to know what processes are
oh yeah, it's
running.
like
So
a like oh Linux,
PS
like yeah, PS, like or CD, or let's say
yeah. Or
LSAL.
DF if you want to know the disk's file utilization, or VM stat. You know, any of those things, you can just type it into this chatbot window, and it actually goes and runs the command inside the container as if you were typing. And so it's just amazing. But yeah, the mainframe, and the cool thing about LexisNexis, I wrote the change management system for Lexus countrywide. I don't know if they use it outside the US, but long story short, I get on this project and they say, okay, here's what we want to do. We used JAD, Joint Application Development Framework. And so I said, well, what tools do you want me to use for this? And they said, whatever you want to use. I go, what do you mean? They go, we don't care. But it was the Reed Elsevier Science Journals. We built the first website for that back in the 1990s. And so my job, I was the billing lead, was to take all the records for anybody viewing articles in this. The website's still up today. It's called sciencedirect.com. But my job was to take all the interaction with the journals from an HP Unix box, grab the records, do some formatting, and ship them over to a mainframe, an MVS, IBM MVS system running COBOL. They said, we don't care what you use. So I ended up, the database was Oracle at that time, one of the first thread safe versions, 7.5 or 7.6.
Right.
So I used combination of Perl to get, there was some drivers, some cool stuff for Perl back then to get it out of the Unix box. I used TCL, Tool Command Language, kind of a predecessor to Java out of Sun Microsystems, and used TCL to get it across the campus over and stuff it into the mainframe. So
yeah,
I've had a lot of exciting.
it's like that's a lot of it's a heavily technical thing that like that you've been involved with back in the day. But if you want to, like, so let's say if we want to segue into your background, like you said, you kind of like were like the generalist in a way growing up, or what was it like?
It was a lot of fun because the cool thing was you could tackle just about any project. Now my background, is varied because of that. I've got a lot of experience in production and manufacturing. I've done CAD CAM implementations. I computerize some processes. In the CNC world, there's a company called Mazak, an amazing company. So I integrated turning centers, they're called lathes, and milling centers, some CAD stuff. Just, you just run into stuff and it's like, hey, can you do this? Well, I've never done it before, but I can figure out how to do it.
Right.
And so I've probably moved, I don't know how many terabytes or what's the next,
Petabytes or hexabytes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I actually moved over to Sydney, which was about 3 hours from where we grew up, I just hated it. And we had vacation at Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. And for 14 years, I'm bugging my wife. It's like, we need to move to the ocean. We need to move to the ocean. She says, well, if you can find a job, we'll move. Well, within a couple of weeks, the town of Hilton Head Island flew me down to interview for their first database administrator for the town. And I'm doing the interview, and the guy says, well, okay, the GIS manager, he goes, well, what are the 5 forms of normalization? I said, I don't know. And you could hear a pin drop. I says, I got about 27 books on my bookshelf. If you really need to know what they are, I can tell you. But if you'd rather know why we normalize data in a database environment and then why we actually denormalize it, I'd be happy to explain that. But if you're looking for a textbook explanation, I got a book I can share. And so they're like, okay, this is the right guy.
Yeah, do you feel like
So
is it just because when you go into these very complex roles, or let's say these new roles that just that doesn't really beat the eye or beat an eye or something like that? Do you feel like it's just you're just trying to get something, just learn the basics and then tread along with it, like just see what works and what doesn't work?
I don't know. That's an interesting question, ST. Um, well, I use over my career a variety of frameworks. And to me, that's the secret. If you have a framework that you can lay over top of a challenge, and Elon Musk, again, since he's in the news, we'll pick on him. He used this first principle concept. He's got this framework to lay over top of how he thinks things through. And like when I was in the Marine Corps, I'm 19 years old and I'm doing some processes and the manuals are all screwed up. So I say, hey, this is how it should be done. And my boss forwards it up the chain of command and I get back what's called a letter of commendation. It said, you're exactly right. Our process sucks and you pointed out some problems we have. We're working on it and we appreciate it. And here's a letter of commendation for your file because what you're saying is exactly correct. So that just comes natural to me to break a process down. And there's a guy, the late Colonel John Boyd, the OODA loop. He talks about deconstruction and construction. He says, how do you make a snowmobile? We take all these just separate parts, a tread here, a handlebar there, a seat, and you reassemble it into something that never existed. And so I've been very good at that.
Got it. And and you've been a consultant, you've been a business owner, you've tried out these different things, but then let's segue into your current venture, which is FastCharge Energy.
This is my 22nd startup, by the way.
22nd.
Yes.
Okay. Before we go into that, how many of the 21 startups you ran were successful, and how many of them failed?
I had 2 successful exits where I got money back at the end of the day. Some of them only lasted. Here's another piece of my philosophy. I learned this from the late Dr. Ellie Goldratt. He basically said you can fix anything in 90 days or less. So a lot of those didn't last 90 days. I got in and I found out I misunderstood something or the market moved that fast. And so there's probably 10 or 12 of those that did not live beyond the 90-day period.
Yeah.
I've had a couple spectacular failures, but again, like Mandela said, they're not failures; they're learning experiences, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I learned, like Edison, I learned, 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb. So, but the cool thing is 2 exit. But here's why number 22, because I haven't built a unicorn yet.
So
this is it. FastCharge Energy is a $1 billion company.
Why do you say that?
Look around. Where are you going to find gasoline for your car in America? Well, in the rest everywhere, it's going to get tougher and tougher. And the opportunity, think of this. Tesla has over 40,000 charging stations around the globe. Less than 1% of them are broke. Okay. Everybody else has to use public networks, if you will, and 25 to 45% of those charging units are broke.
Yeah.
Okay. That looks like a huge opportunity. Then President Biden gets this thing called the infrastructure bill passed, and he says, we're going to throw $7.5 billion at this. And it's like, okay, what's the rules? We get the rules. It's like, we can do this in our sleep. And so what we've ran into, we started this about 6 months ago. To back up, this is still part of this 20-second startup is part of something we call affordable quarters. My wife and I had plans to build a house out of 2 shipping containers, 2 40-foot shipping containers, and put them together and cut an archway in them. And, because we're downsizing, you get older, the kids are out of the house. And so, the way I approach things is I start a business around it. Okay. So we've sold some shipping containers to other people. We've got a gorgeous Airbnb that one of our clients built. And somebody says about 6 months ago, have you ever thought of making charging stations out of those? We said, yes.
Basically using shipping. So what you're trying to do is use shipping containers or any like recycled materials to build these charging stations.
I call them rescue containers because everybody's driven by a cornfield in America and saw a stack of shipping containers. Okay, we want to rescue those, give them a new life as a.
It's like you're rebranding those into something more unique. Like because if you've noticed throughout history of these anytime a new venture pops up or something like that is going to be making a massive impact, they always create these buzzwords or these pun terms or all these terms that could be like that's going to be part of the Oxford Dictionary. Like for example, Google.
Oh, yeah.
Like Google was never before 1998. Google was just like nobody even heard what that name is, and now it's like now it's officially a verb in the dictionary.
Yes. Yeah, like the E-Trade commercials. You got to love the guy that came up with the concept of a shankopotamus for somebody that shanks the ball when he golfs. So life's for marketers. Life's prize is to create a verb.
Yeah.
And we're working on it.
Go ahead. Sorry. So the way I was gonna envision what you're trying to build is that, so what is it that you see in the market that is like, okay, you mentioned that a lot of things are broke, they break down pretty easily. So how do you see that shipping containers will be the ones that never break?
That's a great question, and I got an answer you're not going to believe. We go down to the state of Ohio. The states are getting basically a fifth of the money over 5 years. We go down and we listen to their plan, and they say, okay, we're going to get $20 million the first year, and we think we can build roughly 20 charging stations. And the infrastructure bill is primarily designed to put charging stations, FastCharge, DC FastCharge, within the interstate system, within 50 miles of each other. The premise being, if people can drive and be assured of getting a charge, EVs can become popular. Okay, so as they say that, my partner and I, we were seated there and we stop and look at each other. And we said, he just said they expect to spend $1 million per charging station. We can do that for half that price or less.
Right.
But not just do it in a little different. No, we can take a 40-foot shipping container. Half of it, less than 20 foot, is dedicated to the 4 chargers on one side. You can put 4 more on the other side. You can put 2 on the other end. And guess what? That allows us 40 foot inside the container for a pop-up store.
Really?
Think of that.
So you could literally, instead of just having 2 or 3 buildings, be like, like if you see Tesla charging stations all over the place, they're just like isolated.
Yeah, like at a gas station. They look like a row of pumps.
Yeah, a row of pumps. Yeah. But what you're trying to do is enhance the pumping experience in a way. Like you want to be there can be someone who can be offering customer service or something like that.
A coffee shop, donut shop. There's a cool gas station in South Carolina on the border between South and North Carolina on I-95. It's called South of the Border. And for 100 miles in either direction, they keep telling you, you're so many miles from south of the border. It's an experience. It's a destination. That's what we can do. And then we can rent these out. And we can say, Esty, how'd you like to have a pop-up store? We've got the one in Raleigh, North Carolina is going to be available for lease. It's a
So you can
90-day lease.
basically what you could do is just experiment. Like if you need to set up a business, you want to experiment something with the customers when they're charging their station, you can just say, "Hey, here's some free food, free samples of what I'm making." You can just offer that and say, "Hey, do you like it? I hope you had a great time." And then, all right, on to your next destination.
Yep, yep, yep. So we can do it for half the price, give them a better solution by far, and fix the shopping experience. You're going to get Wi-Fi when you're sitting there. Okay. Some pop-up store owners will want to give the Wi-Fi for free. Some will want to charge. We don't care because we can use these rescue containers that are designed to withstand hurricanes, typhoons, all kind of calamity.
Yeah. Just
We
wondering
can't hurt them.
Yeah, let's go into more of like a scientific question. How does these, like, for example, these rescue containers are like, they're like the building structure, right? So
Yes.
how does the charging work? Like, say, so is the car going to be parked? Is the station going to be like anchored to the container?
The think of charging posts like you've probably seen Teslas. Like here in Ohio, they're often at a Sheetz gas station, and they look like a row of 8 or 10 or 12 pumps. Okay. Well, ours will actually be bolted to one of the sides and or the end of the container. So they just pull up like in a traditional parking spot. It's labeled like a parking spot. They drive up to it, they plug in, and they charge.
Yeah.
But inside the one end of that container is all the guts that make that work. Think about this. We have to bring in and the infrastructure bill says you have to have at least 4 ports, again, 150K each. So we have to bring in, I think it's 1,000 volts, 1,600 amps to drive that. So, that takes some infrastructure built in the end of that building to make that happen.
So do you feel
there has to be a transformer?
I mean, if you notice, like, I mean, you're getting a discount, let's say, if you're using these containers, but then if you want to build the overall structure, it's going to be incurring more costs at the end. But how does
minimal?
Like, okay, how much? Okay, for example, how much does it cost to build a charging station? Like I say, I forget how much Tesla spends on building one charging station versus how much you're looking to put in just to build that overall, like this whole big experience kind of thing.
Yeah. First off, disclaimer: nobody can quote me on these numbers. These are rough estimates, but we can sell that to you. Let's say that you get excited and you want a charging station in your backyard. One of the requirements is it has to be within 1 mile of an exit of an interstate, and you happen to have some land. So we can sell it to you for $500,000. It's what we call Title 23 money. So that means the government's going to give you 80% of the money to do this. You only have to put up 20%. You have to guarantee to do it for 5 years. Can't just do it. And so we can build that complete thing out with the pop-up store for less than $250,000.
Makes sense. Interesting. So right now, where are you at currently? I think you mentioned before the interview, you said you're still trying to build the first one, right?
Well, we've quoted some. We haven't had anybody buy them. Right now, we have access to some units. It took some effort. We started out with some companies who said they could give us units, cost us $100K. Well, the last one we quoted last week, I think, was $34,000 for a single charger. It had nothing to do with the shipping container. This was for a hotel destination. One of the things that we pitch is if you are in a destination like Hilton Head Island, where I spent almost 5 years, people come there for a lot of reasons, and many people have EVs. So it's a great combination. So we say, look, your hotel ought to offer a part of the valet service is while you're eating a meal here or sightseeing or whatever, you ought to have a DC fast charger, and you can get 100, 200 miles. You might even get an 80% charge while you're doing whatever. So that's what we're quoting today. the infrastructure bill where these people are going to build these units and they have to have the 4 ports, none of them are underway yet because they just finalized the plan in December.
Would you be looking for government subsidies to be able to build each of these, or just going to be like just someone's going to pay you?
No, here's the cool thing with the DC fast charger. We've done the pro formas on it. You could buy one of these. Let's say your buddy runs a hotel.
Yeah,
you could buy one of these. You guys get along. You go on fishing trips, whatever. Say, hey, I found this opportunity. I can get my hands on this DC fast charger for your valet parking. And he's going to say, great. He's going to put up a little bit of money. You're going to put up a little bit of money, and you will get your money back within 12 to 24 months.
Right.
Because the DC fast charger is going to put 150 kW, up to 150 kW into the car. And so the problem, guys that are doing hotels with what we call level 1 or level 2 chargers, AC current, they're only putting 7 or 8 kilowatts into the car in an hour. It takes them forever to make any money. That's why a lot of them have charges. Hey, you want to park here? We're going to charge you so much to park here plus energy. But if you can pull in there, and if we could dump 100 kW in there, while you're eating lunch, okay, we get paid by the kW. So we can show you how to make money in definitely less than 24 months. And if you're in a destination spot like Hilton Head Island, you could probably get your money back in a year.
Got it. All right, sounds good. So yeah, I think I just want to let you know that we're running short of time, but
Okay.
I just want to ask one last question.
Yes.
Like, you've been in the world of entrepreneurship for 40 years now. Like you've been through the ups and downs. You've seen a lot of things. What advice would you give to an up and comer on like what to do?
I typically say 3 things. 1, it's not for the faint of heart. Okay. If you need somebody to pump you up, to motivate you, this won't work. It's a lifetime commitment. Okay. Number 2, and I wish I was the guy that coined this phrase, but I didn't, find a need and fill it. Okay. So many people get an idea and they don't. And Ash Moore, the guy who wrote Running Lean and the Lean Canvas, he goes, life's too short to build something nobody wants. So find a need and fill it. And then the third piece of advice is find a small team, what Napoleon Hill called a mastermind. Find a small group of people. Think of this. When Elon bought Twitter, he reached out to his mafia, to his network, and said, hey, I need you guys to swing by the clubhouse. We need to figure out what's going on here. So you need this insider group that you can trust, that have your back. And with those 3 things, I think you can do anything.
All right, cool, Ski. Thank you so much for coming on the Next in Time podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing how your venture can really make a massive difference in the world.
Thank you.